and you could say they out-Raven the Ravens. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for September the 23rd. Week 3 is now in the books, and we're going to start with the last thing that we saw, which was the Monday night showdown between the Baltimore Ravens and Detroit Lions. And the Lions, once again, with an impressive effort on the heels of their blowout of the Bears in their home opener last week. They come back in week 3 against one of the best teams in the NFL, and you could say they out-Raven the Ravens. They went into Baltimore and punched the Ravens in the mouth, rushing for over 250 yards. They had 2 drives of 95-plus yards, and they had 7 sacks on defense. This, once again, looks like a very complete football team. And I think it shows us they can never buy too much into what you see week 1, because in week 1, it really looked like they were feeling the losses of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And I think to some degree they were. There were some growing pains there in week 1. I talked to Jahmyr Gibbs last week. He said in that game at Lambeau, there were some communication issues that they had to work out, which makes sense because you got 3 main communicators on the offensive side of the ball, your center, your quarterback, and your coordinator. And the Lions were switching out 2 of those 3 spots. Since then, they've really put their foot on the accelerator. They rushed for over 250 yards on the Ravens. They had 2 drives of 90-plus yards. They had 7 sacks. In just about every way you can possibly imagine, this looked like an impressive team. And here's the most encouraging thing. It feels to me like the personality of the Lions that we saw the last few years is now back. And that was what I was concerned about coming out of week 1, is so much of their identity ran through their offensive line, ran through their creativity on that side of the ball. And we saw those things. One of those 90-plus yard touchdown drives was capped with a handoff option look where the ball was handed off, then pitched to David Montgomery for the touchdown. You saw that creativity at play. And then I think the other piece of it is just what we've seen on the offensive line. And, some of the concerns you may have had with Frank Ragnow retiring, with Kevin Zeitler no longer there, the interior of the offensive line is Taylor Decker getting a little bit older at left tackle. Are you feeling that? Well, it didn't look like they had very many concerns at all along the offensive line in week 3 against the Ravens. Decker and Penei Sewell look as solid as ever. And then on the inside, the group of Tate Ratledge, the rookie, Christian Mahogany, the second-year player, and the veteran Graham Glasgow as the pivot man, really looked like it was working. So it may have taken a week for them to get their feet underneath them, but this Lions team very much looks like the Lions team of the last couple of years. Jared Goff was dealing last night. The offensive line was blowing the Ravens off the ball. Montgomery, Gibbs looked good running behind that line. And the defense looked creative, looked multiple, was getting to the quarterback. Aiden Hutchinson looks like he's a defensive player of the year candidate already, coming back off the broken leg. So an A-plus performance from the Lions. Again, they look like they're back. Now, what does this mean for the Ravens? I wouldn't be too concerned. They were 1-2 last year. They've been here before. We've seen this with with these types of teams that are perennial winners, where sometimes they'll use September to figure some things out. Obviously, defensively, not having Kyle Van Noy and Nnamdi Matabuke did not help last night, in either in stopping the run or getting after Jared Goff. So I do think a lot of those things are going to work themselves out. However, this sets up for a very big game in week 4, with the Ravens playing the Chiefs, a 4:25 Eastern game. The loser of that game, of course, will come out at 1-3 and have to dig themselves out of a little bit of a deeper hole. All right, our second topic coming out of week 3, the Philadelphia Eagles are now 3-0. They've won 19 of 20. And that was a huge win against the Los Angeles Rams at home. Could determine where a playoff game is held in January. I think both those teams are going to be there at the end in the NFC. But more than just that, I think the way they got the win was significant, both in what they were able to do in the second half of the game and also who they were leaning on. On the front end of that, like they were down 26-7 at the beginning of the third quarter. They went into halftime down 19-7. Jared Verse has a strip sack at the beginning of the game, which affirmed some of the things you saw in the first half of the game, where it very much looked like with Lane Johnson down, the Rams were owning the line of scrimmage. The Rams cashed that strip sack in for a touchdown. It's 26-7. It looks like everything is going wrong for the Eagles. It looks like this thing's coming unraveled a little bit. And now you've got a test of a team that maybe hasn't been the best playing from behind or isn't structured to play from that far behind in that situation in the second half. And so being able to come back behind Jalen Hurts from that sort of deficit in the second half, I think is very significant. It's something they can file away, and doing it against that opponent, a very good opponent with a very good defense. I think they can hang their hat on that going forward. It gives them another dimension that maybe they didn't even have last year so much during their championship year. Here's the second thing is that they leaned on the guys that they have invested in. And you saw it with the 2 blocked field goals, one from Jalen Carter, one from Jordan Davis. It shows their ability to get the most out of those guys. And then like with Saquon Barkley slowed in the first half and then rendered a little less relevant in the second half because of the deficit, they were really able to lean on Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown down the stretch of that game. And I thought really their ability to go back to those guys on third down over and over and over again. And the Rams' inability to stop those guys, Jalen Hurts' trust in those guys, that's something that I think that they can carry out of this game as well. So a big win for the Eagles. Again, that could determine where a playoff game is played in January. And as for the Rams, what it means for them, I'm going to pay attention over the next few weeks to what that corner position looks like. It's a spot that they haven't invested very much in, and part of that is philosophical in the way that they built their team. They've put so many resources into the defensive line. Is that a spot where they could augment? Is that a spot where they could add? It's been over 5 years since they've spent a top 100 draft pick on a corner. They obviously traded Jalen Ramsey a couple of years ago. They have not invested in the same way that position. And again, part of that is philosophical. Is this something where they look at it and say, we're going to see the Eagles again, and we're going to have to deal with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith again? Is that an area where the Rams could add? That's something I will pay attention to going forward. Finally, our third topic, the Colts. That's right. The Indianapolis Colts are 3-0 going into the final weekend of September, and they've got a big one on Sunday in Los Angeles against the Rams, and really an opportunity now in front of the Colts to stamp their start and let everyone know that they are for real. And here's what I like about this is that this to me is the manifestation of the way that they looked at their team this offseason. And really, if you want to talk about what Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard looked at coming out of 2024, they saw a team that won 8 games despite being 30th in the NFL in giveaways and 29th in the NFL in total defense. So they felt like they needed a philosophical change on defense. They bring in Lou Anarumo and they empower him to bring in some guys in free agency that fit his scheme. So they go out and they sign Cam Bynum from Minnesota and they sign Mooney Ward from San Francisco. And so getting some pieces for their secondary that can help make them a little bit more aggressive on the front end really has unlocked, I think, the potential that they have with some of their front end defensive players. Obviously, guys like Zaire Franklin and DeForest Buckner that have been around for a long time. And then offensively, they really just wanted somebody who could come in and maximize what was out there. They didn't feel like Anthony Richardson was able to maximize the talent that they had on hand. And they felt like, again, like on paper, that the guys that they had were good enough, and that if somebody could just come out and run Shane Steichen's offense, that he'd be able to get the most out of them, or they'd be able to get the most out of those guys. So Daniel Jones comes in and he wins the job by being able to operate Shane Steichen's offense efficiently. And now you're seeing a better version of that skill group between Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Warren. They've got talent there. The young offensive line's coming along with Bernard Raymond as sort of the new anchor there as the left tackle. And so what I like about where the Colts are is that they felt like they were a lot closer than people realized, based on those statistics, based on the fact that defensively, like they just needed a little bit of a philosophical change, maybe a little bit of a system reset. And then offensively, they just needed somebody who could come in and empower the people around them. And Daniel Jones has been able to do that. And away they go. And this week we'll get a good view on just how far they've come when they go up against a Rams team that, of course, again, is coming off of a crushing loss in Philadelphia. Appreciate you guys coming out. As always, you can get me your feedback on social media, on Twitter, at Albert Breer, on Instagram, at Albert_Breer, on Facebook, at Albert R. Breer. We will have a mailbag edition coming for you Wednesday, another Breer Report on Friday. Can't wait to see you guys then.